Man, I started recording this episode a couple of different times today. There has been a lot of coaching changes on Sunday/Monday, where Stan Drayton at Temple got got fired, and then it just kept on coming. Tom Herman at Florida Atlantic got fired. UMass, Don Brown got fired, and then Charlotte, Biff Poggi got fired. And so you see this kind of string of coach firings as we get towards the end of the season. And there are a couple of different reasons for that, I think, in that one, if somebody is right there on the edge of teeter-tottering on whether or not that they could win the last two games, and then that would make them more difficult to fire, you go ahead and make the move now. I think that's somewhat like Stan Drayton. His issue at Temple was the last two games of their season were somewhat winnable. And so instead of ending the season on a 3-game winning streak and then firing somebody, because that leads to a lot of questions that nobody really wants to answer. No athletic director wants to sit there and be like, well, you see, the reason we fired somebody who finished the season on a 3-game winning streak is because we think they're lucky that they got 3 games to win back-to-back-to-back. We don't think they're the right person to lead our program. Like, that's a tougher sell than after winning 1 game or not winning a game. And so these firings continue to happen. And I think there's an interesting look in that all of the firings thus far have been at the group of 5 level. Not a Power 5 job open. Now, that doesn't mean that that's not going to happen or that there might not be, a retirement here or there. North Carolina. But I wonder if it's just an anomaly. If it's just one of those weird coincidences where it's like, oh, you know what? Actually, yeah, that's funny that it happened that way. Or if there is a real, truly tangible byproduct of the NIL era in that, you know what? Buyouts are really hard to pay out right now. That it's really difficult to go ask with your hands out to your big dollar boosters and say, excuse me, I need some money to pay for a mistake I made. That's a tough spot to be in. And so I wonder if, because at the group of 5 level, the buyouts aren't nearly as strong as they are at the Power 5 level. For instance, at Florida Atlantic, I think it was Tom Herman is owed $4 million. That's couch change to Power 4 programs. Brian Kelly's buyout's like $65 million. $4 million compared to $65 million. So I wonder part of it is, I wonder if there is if it's real, if it's not an anomaly, if it's the money is so now cash strapped at the Power 4 levels that we can't afford to buy out the coaches that we want to buy out. And at the same time, we need to start negotiating better contracts where the buyouts aren't going to be so astronomical and ridiculous. And it's been that way for so long. And I don't know that the market has ever dictated the idea that you need to pay astronomical sums for buyouts in order to take really good jobs. Because at places like in LSU, for instance, you have all of the leverage. I know that maybe in the most recent negotiation with Brian Kelly, where, he is at Notre Dame, he has a great job already. He doesn't need LSU as bad as LSU needed him. But there are other schools where it's like, hey, we're going to win with pretty well whoever the hell we hire. Whatever slapdick we slap into our head coaching spot, we're going to be pretty good. So I'm not going to pay a $40 million buyout to somebody if they are an abject failure. And that's just been the way that the industry has operated. And I think that's weird and backwards. And it hasn't been that way at the group of 5 level, which gives them way more flexibility. that, you know what, if we think somebody has been terrible, we can get out of this. We can end this contract and move on really quickly. And there's no harm, no foul. And so and at those group of 5 levels, they don't have necessarily the same NIL constraints, and constraints might not be the right word, but don't have the issues of the buyouts on top of, we need to continue to fund the NIL monster. Because when your buyout's $4 million, is $4 million to Florida Atlantic a lot of money? Yes. But is it as much as $60 million is to LSU? No. So there's a decided advantage there. On the flip side of that, I wonder how attractive group of 5 jobs are anymore. Because that used to be the pathway to coaching stardom, is you maybe work as a Power 4 coordinator, drop down to a group of 5 head coach, and if you are decently successful, you move up to a B tier Power 4 program and then move up to a big time job. Or if you're uber successful, you move directly to a Power 5 head coaching job. Pipeline doesn't really exist anymore because the money is not equal. You can make as much money, and in many, many cases, significantly more money by working as a Power 4 coordinator than you do as a group of 5 head coach. And not only that, we have seen kind of the thought process from some programs change. It used to be you had to be insanely successful to land a blue blood job. Doesn't necessarily work that way anymore. Kirby Smart didn't have head coaching experience when he got the job at Georgia. Dan Lanning didn't have head coaching experience when he got the job at Oregon. Ryan Day had never been a head coach at Ohio State before he got the job. Sharon Moore at Michigan, never been a head coach before he got the job. They didn't have to go to the MAC or the Sun Belt and prove that they could do it before they got the job, because I think a lot of programs figured out we're probably going to be successful on a lot of different avenues. And we're not just completely beholden to hiring the next college football wonderkind. That's just not the way it works. Steve Sarkisian had been a head coach, but he left a coordinator job to take the job at Texas, one of the premier jobs in America. That avenue of the pathway, I guess, has opened. You don't have to be a successful group of 5 head coach now to get a Power 4 job, and a really good Power 4 job. I mean, even Ryan Walters is the head coach at Purdue. Never been a head coach before. Now, that might not be the case in point some people want to make, because I don't know that he's going to survive to December 1st. But the idea that group of 5 jobs used to be so insanely sought after because that was the pathway to making really good money as a coach, I think those days are gone. It's the haves and the have-nots, and the group of 5, for better or worse, are the have-nots and don't have the money to attract top-tier coaching talent, especially. And in the past, they hadn't either. But the thing that they offered was, if you come here and you're successful, you're going to be gone in 3 or 4 years. You're going to be gone to somewhere bigger and better, where you're going to be making a lot of money, and you're going to be viewed as a god on that college campus. Doesn't really work that way anymore. And I've talked about this before on the show, that it's one of the downfalls, I think, because that's one of the good things about group of 5 football is you get kind of that on-the-job training. I talking about, guys going from coordinator to head. Marcus Freeman is a guy who we've talked about on the show that it's not his fault. It's Jack Swarbrick's fault that he hired a coach that needed on-the-job training at a place where on-the-job training is not acceptable. And so that's Group of Five football used to be that on-the-job training that prepared you for the Power Four, that prepared you for the big time, the bright lights, the big noon kickoffs, all of those things. That doesn't really exist anymore. And so I wonder just how attractive Group of Five head coaching jobs are, especially if you're coming from a Power Four job, if you're coming from a coordinator or a position coach at a Power Four, where you've seen that, maybe your team flies to every game, or you get, if you want new hot tubs for the facility or cold tubs or whatever equipment, facilities, all that stuff, whatever you want, you get. And then you go to a Group of Five school and the budget's a little more constrained, and maybe you got to take a bus to some away games, or you fly commercial, or whatever the case may be, where you're not making as much money as you were as a coordinator, but you're getting to run your own ship. That's obviously going to stay it's going to be alluring to a lot of people. But to some folks, they might just recognize, like, hey, you know what? I'm just fine leading a position. I'm fine being a coordinator. Fine making a lot of money and not dealing with the headaches of scraping for NIL, where I'm losing recruiting battles simply because we don't have the money that somebody else might have, or the uniforms, or whatever the case may be. We don't have the facilities. I hope we don't get to that spot where being the wide receivers coach at a B-tier SEC or Big Ten program is viewed as a better job than a head coach at a power, or as a Group of Five program at a Mountain West school. I hope we don't ever get to that spot, but I think we might already be there. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. See you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.